Hello, I'll be breaking in from time to time in the video to add corrections, clarifications, and additional information. So watch out for that.
One of the most difficult things in communicating, sharing, especially non-interactively, like a recorded video, is that there is so much room for misinterpretation, willful or ignorant. A large portion of the practice of dialectic is merely making sure that all parties involved in the conversation are using the same meanings when they use the same words, or that we are interpreting things on the same page, as it were. And something like a statement of "there's no such thing as time" is difficult, because what does that mean? That could mean a lot of different things depending on where you're coming from and what you're trying to communicate. For example, there's no such thing as time in the way that people traditionally think about it, as a flowing track. That may be more accurate than the kind of more easily rebuffed "there's no such thing as time, so what is this? What is, how can I move? How can I throw a ball? Etc. So the kind of subcategory and drilling down to the actual meaning of a phrase, and certainly of an idea, is half of the conversation altogether. So with a momentarily one-way street here until you take the time to write a comment or record a video in response, I have to do the best I can to explain it as clearly as I can without over-explaining.
Which I realize I just did, but I want to set the stage for the fact that the first time you hear an idea, it might not be expressed in a way that is easy to grasp, because we have these preconceived notions about the other way, which is not necessarily accurate, but it's something that we've known for all our lives, or is just taken for granted. So over-explaining happens, but it's to point us towards a clear communication.
So here we go. If I say something like "there's no such thing as time," that means in the sense of a flow of a thing, a measurement that comes from a place called the future, washes over us in a time called the present, and recedes behind us into a thing called the past. That's not necessarily the best, most accurate way to view this.
The big concept here is that time is not some kind of animation film strip that comes toward you, and things are slightly different at some nearly immeasurable frame rate of time. That's not how reality works. Reality simply is. It is all here now, and our perception moves through it in a single direction. That's it. The future does not become today. We become the future, and we call it today.
Time is a dimension. It is the fourth dimension, if you'd like. Length, depth, height, time. We don't think about dimensions in the way that is accurate or helpful a lot of the time. Marvel Cinematic Universe, people are hopping between dimensions all the time. But if you start looking into the math and theory about it, you start to learn things like dimensions are in requirement of being 90 degrees to each other. Multiple dimensions overlap at the same time. Yeah, of course they do. Length, width, depth, height, time. So that should be obvious. If we thought about dimensions in the way that dimensions actually exist. A dimension is a space, it's a measurement.
In about 40 seconds, I'm going to say this more clearly, that a dimension is a space where you can take a measurement, rather than it being the thing itself. It's the potential for a measurement to be taken. the awareness of the length of an object, the span of time of something, duration. Stay tuned.
The dimension of a shoebox is what, 14 inches, who knows. But the thought that time is a dimension unto itself, it doesn't mean that you open up some portal and you look through and, oh, there's time and there's like a bunch of floating clocks and wizards and steampunk things. Nor does it mean that it is this flowing thing, because that's not a dimension. A dimension is a space where something can be measured. A distance of movement in the physical length, width, depth, 3D, is one thing. But if we think about time as another one of these dimensions, it's helpful, because with, for example, depth, we can talk about, the axis is labeled depth, and at the center point, at the origin point, there's, here, and you're looking at it, so it's subjectively, from your interpretation, something you're looking at. Depth, nearer and further away. Simple as that. Breadth, you can say to the left, to the right, to the east, to the west. Your z-axis or y-axis goes north and south, up and down, so on. And the duration, which is the same thing as distance, in this dimension is where we get a measurement. So the distance in a dimension is a measurement. Time is the same way. The origin point of the graph is now, the present. Behind us on the graph is the past, and ahead of us is the future. And the thing is that with a spatial dimension rather than a temporal dimension, temporal time, a spatial dimension, we can see it. We have control over it. We can move in a 3D space. With a temporal dimension, the other thing about a 3D space is we can see where things are not, because we can move around. We can see what part of this space is not a stick. So we know everything that's not the object. Now, if we look at temporal dimensions, 4D, time, we are locked into the moment we can experience, which is now. Everything else does not exist for us. That's one of those tricky things with the terminology, because if I say it doesn't exist, then you can say, well, it happened, it's the past, it exists. But right now, the past does not exist. It's not here in the space where we are, so therefore it literally cannot be accessed. The past does not exist now. The past existed, which is a conceit of language. The past existed. The past doesn't exist. The past existed when it happened, and we can't access that. All we can see are the records of it, and consult our memories of it. And as Alan Watts said, even your memory is happening now. And if you think about that for a moment, you get it. I'm reading the record of the past in this moment now when I'm thinking about it. I'm not reading the past. I like the idea that it's a wheel. So if you picture yourself, this little cartoon character on top of a wheel that's turning, the future comes toward you, as you walk on top of the wheel, it rolls around into the past. That's an unhelpful way to look at it, because time is not coming to us. Time does not move. The big concept here is that we move through time. And it's easy to say, oh, yeah, that makes sense, we move through time. But what that means, in a broader sense, is that everything that happens now, in this moment, the ever-present now, it is simply a consequence of things that were done in the moment before. This is Newton's first law stuff. Object in motion tends to stay in motion.
I shouldn't just throw out Newton's first law like that. For example, a baseball crashes through a window, not because the future brought that crash to us, but because the baseball was in motion at some point in time and continued to be in motion as our experience, our perception of now goes toward that inevitable conclusion. Unless something interrupts that baseball, it's going to crash through a window.
The wheel isn't turning around us. We are walking around the wheel. Or, time is not a river that flows past us. We are the ones who are moving. Our consciousness, our perception, our now is what is moving through the dimension of time. Our experience of this, our memory, our recollection, is a measurement. The memory of something that happened before this exact moment. That's it. The future is all conjecture. Just assumptions, prognostication, scrying, fortune telling, guessing, betting, overthinking. The future does not exist. And we may worry about a million different possibilities of the future. Here's the thing, only one actually will exist. So we've wasted all that energy on 999,999 other possible things that didn't happen.
Don't take calling that a waste the wrong way. We have to do that because we need to be prepared for the future in some measure. This is not an ignorance is bliss sort of situation. What it is contextualizing the efficacy of this prognostication for the future. One reality will come to be, but things that are realistic in that potential are germane to consider. It's worth thinking about potentials, chances of things, likelihoods. It just makes sense. The reality is that all of the ones that don't happen, that energy is wasted, but it was a prudent thing to think about in some instances. Not necessarily all.
Would we have been more prepared for them if they did happen to happen? Maybe, but a lot of those were nowhere close to being able to happen. Wasted energy, stress. There is no future. It is now. Everything we think about the future is just that, a thought. Now, that's again one of those things that could be misinterpreted. There is dimensionally a future on that graph. I mentioned it before. But what we can, in our present, think about the future does not exist. So our conception of the future, so maybe that's a helpful word, our conception of the future is of a future that does not exist. The future exists when it, for us, perceptually, experientially, when it gets here. So for us, the future becomes the now, and then it recedes into our past, and our only recollection of that is our memory, because again, the past is gone to us. It's inaccessible to us. It's further back on the graph spatially, and that gets again to another point that, space-time, it's a misnomer. Time is part of space. Time is a spatial dimension. For us, it's one that we don't have the same control over as we can manipulate and maneuver in 3D. But nonetheless, it's only a spatial dimension. It's not its whole own thing. It's not a flow. It's just a dimension we don't have agency in. And the benefit of being aware, being cognizant of that difference in the now, in the ever-present now, is that it's very freeing. Modern Western life is a lot about producing, is a lot about schedules, is a lot about the future, is a lot about everything except now, the only place we have agency. That's exhausting. There's more stress than ever. Even though we're more technologically advanced than ever, we have a higher standard of living, more wealth, whatever that means, than ever, and yet we are more stressed out than we ever have been for large portions of our lives. And we think that we are so much better because we have Nintendos and whatever the new technology is these days. God, AI. But here's the thing, we are distracting and pretending and medicating and soothing a lot. And I do genuinely think that that would be alleviated in a large portion if we could change how we think about time as a society. Capitalism doesn't help. We think about bills, we think about compound interest, we think about schedules for work rather than, oh yeah, I just work. We think about Monday through Friday, then we think about what we're going to do for the weekend, then we think about next week and our 5-year plan. And these are thoughts that we have all the time, and it's exhausting. So, I mean, not to mention we still beat ourselves up for things that happened in the past, and here's the thing, the past doesn't exist for us, so why are we still hurting over it? It's done, it's gone. It is not a part of our lives. Our memories of it are. And that's wild that we have such a society of guilt, shame, and remorse for things we've done. So to understand that the only time we have is now is imperative. If you think of it like a camera lens, I'm going to talk about focal length and aperture. If we talk about a camera lens, we can focus on with a low aperture size, a smaller aperture size, that gives us a longer depth of field, which is what stays in focus. And with that longer depth of field, we can see out further because we can keep more in focus. But that comes at the sacrifice of when we decrease the diameter of the aperture of the lens that receives the light. It doesn't see as well. It needs more light. It needs a longer exposure. All sorts of other things. The analogy here is that is what I just mentioned about keeping our minds in the future and in the past, about projections. Innumerable projections for the future and innumerable recollections of the past. We see, so the focal length, we're the lens, by the way. Our present consciousness is the lens. So the future and the past are very drawn out like this when the aperture is small. The focal length is very long. That's being distracted by time. That does not exist for us. Fantasy. It's imagination, pure imagination. But if we can increase the aperture size, which is to say, be in the present, stay in the moment. Eckhart Tolle, Alan Watts, innumerable people, the Buddhist philosophy in large part, speak about this. So that's a topic for another discussion. But if we can stay in the now, our aperture can be large because we're not distracted as much by focusing adequately on things of the past and the future. What happens when the aperture gets large, our focal length draws closer, closer and closer and closer, and we can see what is right in front of our faces with pinpoint clarity. And that is such a freeing thought and space to be in, unburdened by all of these plans, all of these schemes and machinations. So, not to belabor the point, being aware of the reality of what time is, not our subjective experience built through a lot of societal, millennia of training, I think is a very helpful way to avoid a lot of unnecessary stress. Because if you think about it, all of that stress that I mentioned is unnecessary. It doesn't help us. We need to make plans because our progression into the future is inevitable. But we can take a little bit of the pressure off, and we can spend some time in the present, some of our awareness in the present. And if we can be a little more selective about the things that we have a longer focal length on, then it takes a lot of burden off of the lens. It's as simple and as complicated as that. And there are a number of other examples, interesting, philosophical things to think about. The ship of Theseus, Zeno's paradox is a great one to talk about. Concepts of hypercubes and things like that. So there will be lots more on this subject, and I hope you tune in. And I hope I can explain things from my point of view clearly. I may be wrong on a lot of stuff. So please, if you have thoughts, write in the comments, send me a message. I'd love to hear them. And yeah, let's have this conversation again.